Hi, my name is Leon Sultan. I'm an AP Human Geography and U.S. History teacher at Abraham Lincoln High School in San Francisco, and this lecture is about the early Cold War. The essential question that we're going to study today is who was more responsible for causing conflict in the early Cold War, the USA or the USSR? In order to understand this essential question, let's review. What was the Cold War? Well, the Cold War was a period of conflict between the USA and its allies and the USSR and its allies lasting from about 1945 to about 1991. The Cold War was a conflict of ideologies: capitalism, the United States, Great Britain, and Western Europe, versus communism, the USSR, much of Eastern Europe, and other places throughout the world. Conflict in the Cold War. The USA and USSR never fought directly. Instead, they built up their armies and built up tons of missiles, bombs, and weapons. Both sides spied on each other and supported each other's enemies. While they never fought directly, the USA and USSR fought indirectly many times throughout the Cold War in major wars such as the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the war in Afghanistan. Additionally, it also led to the USA and USSR intervention in other countries and caused many civil wars, including in places like Iran, Guatemala, Cuba, Hungary, Greece, Indonesia, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Honduras, Chile, Dominican Republic, Cambodia, Laos, and many others. In order to understand the early Cold War context, let's go through this timeline. This timeline is going to remind us of some events and introduce some new ones to give us context for the documents that we're going to be studying. So again, our essential question is, who was more responsible for causing conflict in the early Cold War, the USA or the USSR? Remember, the stakes are high. Both countries have nuclear weapons. In 1945, February 4th to 11th, at the Yalta Conference, the US, Great Britain, and USSR were allies. They discussed post-war plans for Germany and Eastern Europe. Later that year, the United States first uses an atomic bomb in war, dropping them on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, with over 200,000 casualties. On August 8th, Russia enters the war against Japan, but on August 14th, Japan surrenders at the end of World War II. Japan surrenders unconditionally to the United States, not to the USSR. So the United States is in charge of post-war reconstruction in Japan. Now, in 1946, 1 year after World War II has ended, Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, delivers a speech. In this speech, he refers to the USSR as the Iron Curtain. So he starts a war of words, saying some very harsh thing against his former ally, Joseph Stalin and the USSR. The Iron Curtain refers to a group of countries in Eastern Europe that were part of the Soviet influence. Here we can see in this map, behind the red line, is what Churchill was referring to as the Iron Curtain, which is East Germany, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria. Now, in 1947, President of the United States, Truman, announces the Truman Doctrine. In it, he says the U.S. will defend any country against communist aggression. Specifically, he's responding to help out a pro-capitalist group in Greece fight against a communist group in a civil war. The same year, the United States announces something called the Marshall Plan, and the U.S. then follows through to spend millions and millions of dollars in order to rebuild Western Europe, including hundreds of millions of dollars to Great Britain, to France, Portugal, Belgium, Netherlands, Italy, Austria, etc., in order to spread its influence. In 1948, there is a communist takeover in Czechoslovakia, where they have a coup d'etat to take over the government. Czechoslovakia then becomes a close ally of the USSR. In 1948, the Berlin blockade begins, and in 1949, it ends. So this lasts for nearly a full year. So, in order to understand, let's take a look at a map of Germany. Germany is divided in two. You have West Germany, controlled by Great Britain and the United States, and then you have East Germany, which is controlled by the USSR. Within East Germany is the capital of Berlin, and Berlin itself is also split in half, with the East being controlled by the USSR and the West being controlled by Great Britain, the United States, and France. Now, outside of Berlin is all East Germany. So East Germany decides to blockade and stop shipments of food. So instead of allowing Berlin to fall in the hands of the USSR, the United States flies in food and other supplies in what's called the Berlin Airlift over the period of 11 months. In 1949, a treaty called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization is formed. This treaty encompasses the United States, Great Britain, France, and many others. It's a group of countries who are allied against the USSR. In this map, we can see NATO. NATO is all the blue countries, which includes the USA, Great Britain, France, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, Spain, Portugal, Italy, West Germany, Norway, Greece, Turkey, Iceland. All these countries agree that if one of them is attacked, that they will all support each other, knowing that the United States has the largest army in the world. Now, in 1955, the USSR forms its own alliance called the Warsaw Pact. In the Warsaw Pact, you have the USSR, Poland, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, and Albania. Now, other nations that are not affiliated with either are called the non-allied nations. In Europe, that's Ireland, Sweden, Finland, Switzerland, Slovenia, Yugoslavia, etc. In 1949, Mao Zedong, a communist, takes control of China. Additionally, the Soviets explode their first atomic bomb. It's just a test, but now they have demonstrated that they have the same technology that the United States has. The USSR makes the bomb with info that they get from spies who they had placed in the United States. In 1955, the Warsaw Pact is formed, an alliance of communist countries opposed to NATO. Your job is to figure out who was more responsible for causing the conflict in the early Cold War, the US or the USSR. You're going to watch this video for the context, then you're going to source and close read a series of documents, highlighting and annotating. You're going to put the sourcing annotations into the peach-colored boxes, the evidence into the light green boxes, and then write one question in the blue boxes. The documents you're going to be looking at are the Iron Curtain speech delivered by Winston Churchill in 1946, the Truman Doctrine. This is a speech given by President Truman to Congress in 1947. Remember, President Truman was a vice president for FDR, and he was also the president at the time that America decided to drop the atomic bombs on Japan. The next is from 1946, and it's a telegram written by a Soviet ambassador, which he explains the Soviet Union's point of view on the early Cold War. Finally, in 1946, the Secretary of Commerce and former Vice President Henry A. Wallace wrote a letter to President Truman explaining his doubts about the United States' role in the conflict. He was later asked to resign. So these are the documents you're going to be analyzing, and this is the format. Good luck. Make sure to take a stand.